Well, Meta platform CEO Mark Zuckerberg took the stand on Monday at a high-stakes trial in Washington over US's antitrust enforcers' claim that the company spent billions of dollars to acquire Instagram and WhatsApp to fend off Facebook competitors. The looming antitrust trial will be the first big test of President Donald Trump's Federal Trade Commission's ability to challenge big tech. Now, Zuckerberg responded to the questions while seeking to combat allegations Meta bought the companies a decade ago to eliminate competition among social media platforms where users connect with friends and family. The FTC has pointed to emails in which Zuckerberg proposed acquiring photo-sharing app Instagram as a way to neutralize a potential Facebook competitor and expressed worry that encrypted messaging service WhatsApp could grow into a social network. The trial could stretch into July. If the FTC wins, it would have to separately prove that measures such as forcing Meta to sell Instagram or WhatsApp would restore competition. Well, Meta will train its artificial intelligence models with its European users' public content and conversations with the Meta AI chatbot. The decision represents a major volte-face from the Facebook and Instagram owner that has previously appeared wary of the European Union's stringent regulations on the use of personal data. According to the social networking giant, people based in the European Union who use Meta platforms can opt out of having their data used for generative AI training purposes. Now, that means everything from Instagram photo captions to Facebook comments could soon be fair game for Meta AI, which Mark Zuckerberg-owned company hopes will overtake market leader ChatGPT. Meanwhile, Japanese authorities on Tuesday said they had issued a cease and desist order to US tech titan Google over an alleged violation of national antitrust laws. Well, it is the first time the country has issued such an order to a global technology giant, Japanese media reported, and follows similar moves in Europe and the United States. Japan's Fair Trade Commission, or the FTC, said the problem is related to the implementation of search functions for Android smartphones in violation of the antitrust law. The Trade Commission accuses Google of imposing binding conditions on Android smartphone manufacturers in Japan since at least July 2020. Specifically, it says Google made sure its online app store, Google Play, would be installed as part of a package with its web browser search app, Chrome. And to give you a rounded perspective on this, we are joined by our guest of the day, Professor Swaran Singh from School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining us at this afternoon broadcast and speaking on this important topic. Now, talking about it, Trump's big tech saga continues in its second term, and this time it is a big blow to Zuckerberg's Meta, sending tremors to the tech industry as well. But at the same time, it is also in line with the intention to break a monopoly. First of all, we would like to understand that how is this a monopoly and crossing all the lines of a fair industry, if at all that is the case, Professor Singh?
Thank you. First of all, in free trade practices, which is usually celebrated, protected and regulated in most Western liberal societies, monopoly is something which is not acceptable, and therefore monopolies must not be allowed to be built or to be created in whatsoever manner, directly or indirectly. That's why so much focus on antitrust, focus on ensuring good regulation so that consumers are always able to have their choices. In this case, about 20 years back when Meta of today was created as Facebook, from inception itself, it has had successive episodes of concerns being issued, the concerns being debated about its practices being a matter of concern. There are commercial films made, there are documentaries and media reports and so on. Similarly, the background of President Trump also is equally interesting in terms of the way he functions as a president. During his first term also, he had issues with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and his team. And the third element, I think, other than the Federal Trade Commission pursuing this antitrust law-driven suit against acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp by Facebook to fundamentally eliminate any competition in personal social networking. What is equally interesting is that this goes beyond just matter of commercial concerns. There was a biographical work published by one of the former employees of Meta, Sarah Wine Williams. She published her memoirs called Careless People, which has highlighted even the security concerns, saying that from 2015, Mark Zuckerberg and his team was building a very close relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, and in that sense, enabling them, empowering them to kind of outcompete American companies on one side, and on other side also create very specific kind of control mechanisms, control tools, particularly for Meta platforms to be used in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, where the fundamental value of liberal American society of ensuring free speech was being kind of undermined by Meta company itself when it operates in some of these areas like Hong Kong and Taiwan and even in China. So that whistleblowers link with China and link with national security being undermined by Mark Zuckerberg and his team has, I think, made this lawsuit much more critical and much more sort of a concern to common citizens in the United States and to the government. And of course, we know the way President Trump takes on these issues, starting from his election. He had been talking of, sort of taking on these big tech companies, and some of them were already, sort of gearing up by ensuring that they are able to placate the White House, either in terms of, for example, doing away with diversity-based hiring, or sort of all other manners of ensuring that the White House feels that they are in compliance with what President Trump wants the big corporations to do. Nevertheless, despite personal meetings, despite being in attendance at various places during President Trump's inaugural, it seems that once again, it's not first time, once again, Meta company and Mark Zuckerberg personally have come in the eye of storm in that sense. And I think coming weeks will continue to keep media's focus glued on what happens to this company, whether it is finally forced to split. And the last story was about 40 years back. I think it was AT&T which faced similar situation. But then once that kind of outcome, if that happens, would be a kind of very clear signal to several other mega tech companies as well. And I'm sure all of them are also very carefully watching each of the events, each part of the process of this lawsuit, which is happening right now by the Federal Trade Commission versus the Meta at this stage.
And taking that point forward, we would really like to know that how are the rest of the industry, the tech industry specifically, receiving this move as which you just mentioned, because social media platforms are also, directly related to an individual's security in terms of personal details and hence linked to safety measures as well. And this goes on a mass platform.
Indeed, the other big story that your media has followed and told your viewers so much about is what happened to TikTok, for example. TikTok was virtually banned in United States, and then of course President Trump came and he's trying to facilitate whether TikTok can be bought by his very dear friend Elon Musk. That process is still in deep freezer, not very clear what happens to that. And in that sense, I think the other person who is very close, Elon Musk is very close, but we have noticed that on issue of tariff hikes, for example, there has been a clear and sharp divergence between Peter Navarro, who's President Trump's trade advisor, international trade advisor, and the views of Elon Musk of another very powerful social media platform, which is X. So, of course, other big tech companies would be interesting to see what happens to them. But I think most important would be whether that also means something for X to also come under scanner of some kind, because Elon Musk's views on tariffs could trigger some kind of sharp response from White House in that sense, and whether that is another comparable personal social networking platform, whether that is also coming under scanner or not, could be another example that media will have to keep an eye on.
And also, it is not only about Meta. Later this month, which is on the 21st of April, the Justice Department will argue that Google should be forced to sell its Chrome browser to limit its dominance in search as well. Will this also allow new competitors to find their voice across one of the most rich industries? Do you think so?
It does provide a certain space to smaller and upcoming startups to fill some of those spaces, particularly when mega companies are under scanner, under certain stress. But as we have seen, the track record of last 3 decades has been that these virtual monopolies or oligopolies, if you don't want to call them monopolies, invariably have been able to wipe out any competition and buy out any startup that seems to potentially compete with them and challenge them. So I would say the history in this case has not been very encouraging of seeing that a real free market will be created on the ground where consumer has multiple choices to take on. And of course, consumer in last 20, 30 years has become the product himself or herself. And very often consumer is completely kept in the dark as to how his data, his pictures, his other information is being utilized by companies that are apparently providing kind of free platforms to them to engage and connect with each other around the world. I believe about half of advertising now for Meta happens only on Instagram. About $1 billion plus per year, I think. And that shows how much of advertising is also shifting to these kind of social media platforms, which are becoming the main connect with the most consumers, and also the way they operate algorithms in further constraining your choices as a consumer and pushing you in certain directions to make choices. Those are also, I think, matters of concern. But at this stage, I think we are only talking of the bigger issues of a particular company buying out all competition. And I think the concerns of consumers and how they are being kept in dark and whether they are on the losing side could also be a matter of concern, which perhaps potentially could come out also for some investigation in future.
And politically talking about it, this also speaks volumes about Trump's move against big tech. But how well is it going to go down with both the Republicans and the Democrats? What do you think?
I think Trump's audacity to use a word that President Obama used to, use very often is unmatchable. The way he's been able to do things, for example, 145% tariffs against China, or putting tariffs against all 86 trading partner countries in a staggered fashion, raising them, shows that he is quite capable of pushing the envelope quite too far. But as we have again noticed in the big issue of tariff hikes, there are pulls and pressures that also begin to show. And the way consumer on the ground becomes anxious, also reflected in how political parties and the bigger voices in those political parties begin to indicate need for restraint. So ultimately, if you look at how for last 300 to 400 years of liberal democracy and free market economies have worked, the big houses have invariably been in a close connect with the major political parties and have had certain amount of influence in policy making and implementation. And in case of United States, and particularly in case of big tech companies, I think last 30 years record is very clear that they wield enormous influence in United States politics. And of course, they wield enormous tools that common people don't even know are being unleashed on them. And that, I think that is something which should be a matter of concern as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Singh, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on this very important global pressing issue. Thank you.